Hello, and I'm going to talk to you about this 27 video knife throwing course I put together over the course of about a year and a half. I put quite a bit of work into this, and culminating about almost 50 years of experience throwing knives, off and on. I injured myself shoulder throwing when I was about 30, and I talk about it in safety. You mess your arm up throwing, overdoing it, and tear a rotator cuff or something, it's going to affect your knife throwing. So there's a lot of emphasis in this course on safety. And I made a little outline because every time I've made this video, I always think of things I wished I'd remembered to say. So I don't want to make this video again. I mean, I've made all the videos. This is the last thing I'm doing, is the introduction, just to talk about what it's about. I think there's like over 6 hours of videos. And you know, I've written some books, and fiction books, and I'll turn my air conditioner turning on. And I found out, you know, if you get hung up on the title or names when you're writing a fiction book, and this isn't fiction, but I found out, write the book first, and then you'll know the title. By the time you get to the end of your writing of your book, you'll know the title. You know, you'll know what to call it. At least that works for me. So I'm doing the introduction last, so I can tell you more accurately what this course has to offer you and your progression to trying to become the best knife thrower you possibly can be. And I may ramble on this. I usually time these things, try to keep it short. I'm just going to talk. I just got out of work. It's late at night. We're yours truly, retired Sgt Shank. I hold down the plumbing department at a large, nationally, I won't mention name, but a home improvement center, one of the big ones, and I work the plumbing department. And I draw a meager Army pension. I did retire out of the Army a long time ago. I'm going to talk about that. I bought this, I'll admit, it's a gimmick just for the knife throwing course. I mean, I was a sergeant in the Army for quite a few, 18 years of my 20 years, more than that, 19 years, almost 19 years, I was a sergeant in the Army. So my name was Sgt Shank for a good part of my life. But I bought this just for this course, I admit it. And I couldn't fit into my old uniforms. I put on some weight, and you may find out when you get older how that goes. But and I ride in on my motorcycle, and that actually is a gimmick, but it wasn't a gimmick. I started making this video course in my backyard, and I live in a valley, and I live in a flood zone, and my backyard is, I live in the center of a very small town in central New York. And even though I'm in a very small, quiet little town, I'm right in the center of it. And you hear cars and Harleys, trucks and dogs barking, and the ambient noise is just so loud. And the bigger problem was I was throwing knives at this target I set up, and it made a muddy path in my yard. And I talk about that. It's a safety risk when you throw knives a lot, as you will be if you follow this course. You know, you're going to be going back and forth getting your knife to throw, or your knives if you're throwing more than one. And if you slip, you could be in trouble, deadly trouble even. I knew somebody, this isn't a knife story, but I knew a teenager when I was a teenager. That poor guy was going in to get some firewood from outside, and it was snowing out, cold, a lot of snow and ice, and he had an armload of firewood, and he was only like 15 years old, you know, a kid I knew in school, and apparently he slipped and he fell on a pointy piece of wood that impaled him, and it killed him. So you don't want to slip carrying anything pointy. So it got to be a mess and a safety hazard, making this in my backyard. I had a dog then, God bless him. He's since passed on, which was a real heartbreaker. but he pooped in my, it was just dog shit and mud. You know, so I decided to take this into the woods, which I've got woods all around the place here. And I'd ride out on my motorcycle because I've got an enduro motorcycle still. I still ride. And I painted it all up Army colors because I'll talk about that. It's just, you know, I'm admitting, you know, it's a bit of a gimmick, but not really with the motorcycle, because I go out on my bike with the camera and the knives, and I had a good time making these videos, honestly. Target's still hanging out there. But yeah, I painted it camel green because my motorcycle originally was white, and it's an enduro. You know, Jap bike. It reminded me of like a Star Wars Stormtroopers, kind of plasticky looking white. So I painted the whole thing black and camo. So I ride in on my motorcycles with my knives, and in one video I even play guitar to make a point about practice and lapses in practice. And I had a little bit of fun with this. But, alright, let me get back to this. I like to tell stories. That is a thing I learned in the Army. I was in the infantry in the olden days. I've been out for a long time, alright? But I was in the infantry for a number of years, and then I went into tanks, where I retired out as a tank platoon sergeant. But I spent a lot of time in the woods with the guys. I was a pretty easygoing sergeant. I had a reputation as a real hard charger, a professional, like you should be, right? A professional NCO and a hard charger, and my group always did best, and safely too. And none of them got killed. To their credit, and I have to say to mine, some as their leader and such. So I like to tell stories, and I've got a YouTube channel. If I'm going to make a Patreon site, some of these are going to go on it. I'm sorry, yeah, I'm trying to make a buck, a small buck. I'm not looking to make much, but I put a lot into this, and you know, an Army pension doesn't go very far as an E7 with 20, really, not today. So yes, I'm going to give away a lot for free on this course. I think there's 27 videos. I think I'll give away a bunch for free, and if you like that, it'll be a nominal fee really to watch the rest. And I'm sorry to do that because I like free things too, but I put a lot of work into this, a lot of time, and quite frankly, I think you're getting quite a lot. So who am I? I've already said my name is Sgt Shank. It's not spelled S-H-A-N-K. It's not, all right? But I know, just kind of a pun, play on words. Shank in prison means a knife. Not that I've been to prison, but a shank means a knife. It's slang for a knife blade. So Sgt Shank. And I always said if Colonel Sanders could sell chicken, and he wasn't a colonel, he was a private. Well, I was a sergeant, and I do have a knife throwing story in the Army, so I can use that. Yeah. I've got almost 50 years of knife throwing experience I come to you with. In the Army, I got to tell you right now, some of you may think that I'm going to teach the military style of throwing knife. In the U.S. Army, as far as I know, there is no military style of throwing knives. They actually frowned on it when I was in, because a lot of guys were throwing knives out in the field and people were getting hurt with accidents, which I talk about that. I think I mentioned a few people getting hurt. I think you're going to hear about them several times. I repeated myself on that. My eyes are getting a little dim. I'm getting old. Definitely. So I'm glad I got this done. Well, I still can. I did not get training at throwing knives in the Army, and they don't teach that as far as I know. So you're getting my technique. But what you are getting from the military is that I was a training sergeant, and I've been to school for it. I actually was a drill sergeant for a stint. And so I'm a trained trainer, and all NCOs in the military are trained how to train. But I went a step further than that, and that they actually made me a training sergeant. And I went to a couple of military courses for that. So I am following the military style, the U.S. military path to learn a skill. And that path is safety first. You know, if you get hurt throwing knives, or even worse, you get killed, it can happen. You know, it's rare that people get hurt knife throwing with accidents. You know, when you're just throwing knives you're not trying to hit anybody, hopefully. But accidents can happen, and they do. And they're a bloody mess when they do. So safety first, so that you remain in the game with no injuries, prison sentences, or guilt trips for hurting somebody. It's usually another person around you that gets hit by your misses or your carelessness. So I'm going to talk. I think there's a lot of classes on safety, on how to first aid for cuts and bleedings. You know, there's different levels of bleeding, and I go into that in safety. So safety first. Then I'm going to talk about knives, about what makes a good throwing knife, balanced knives, things like that. So it's just like we would learn how to teach you how to shoot a rifle in the Army or a machine gun the military way. First, you learn safety. Then you're going to learn all about the weapon systems. Once you've learned safety and the technical aspect of whatever you're trying to do, then we're going to go to the range, and you're going to start learning to throw what we used to call crawl, walk, run. And you're going to start out with basic throws and work yourself up. You know, and I want to say another thing about throwing. My chapter on throwing, I think there's only 5 or 6 classes. But really, I mean, there's just so many ways to throw a knife. And I've got a couple of tricks that I teach, you know, how to throw by the hand, by the blade, or I'm not even going to toss it around when you're sitting down. But I go over the basic knife throws, and then I talk about some tips and things that help me master the spin. Because first you're going to learn to master the spin, just how to throw the knife and hit it reliably. Either throwing it by the hand, the blade, or the handle. And once you master that, and I encourage you, if you follow this course, to see what I mean? There's somebody tearing up Main Street. Crazy. Small town, huh? Big kicks in a small town. So once you learn how to be safe, and also I want to prepare you in my safety training for the inevitable accident, so that you're not suddenly stuck with a gory, bloody mess of yourself or somebody else. It could even be life-threatening. Because you miss and you hit an artery, you're in big trouble. I mean, it could happen. And I want you to be prepared for that. What to do, so you're not trying to figure it out when it happens. It's important. I don't want to be responsible promoting a sport that really, it should, you know, it's a sport. But I don't want anybody to get hurt. And if somebody does get hurt, and it can happen, I want you to be ready to deal with it, as ready as we possibly can. But I want you also to know how to avoid it. So I talk about all that in chapter 1 on safety. Where was I? Once you learn how to stick the knife, reliably stick it. Big knives, small knives, the same knives, I talk about that. Oh, somebody's having fun. I don't know if you can hear that on this. Somebody's tearing up the street. Then we're going to start talking about accuracy, to where you get from just barnyard knife throwing, being able to stick a blade in a tree or a giant target, but where you want to take it, hopefully, is, you know, precision, to where you can really fine-tune it, where you can be extremely precise on hitting a target. So you go from just being a knife thrower to being a precision knife thrower. So the next step is accuracy. Going to work on that after you've learned the base safety and the technical aspect of the knife. Then you're going to learn how to throw the knife and master the spin and stick it reliably, so there's no guesswork in it or no BS factor in it. Once you learn that, and you will safely, then you're going to work on honing in, dialing in your accuracy. and I'll talk about some ways to do that. And once you've done that, that's the course, except for extra material, which at this time is me telling my story about my knife throwing when I was the designated silent entry takeout man. In my younger years, when I was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, my platoon sergeant found me to be a really good knife thrower, and I wasn't really, and he made me the silent entry takeout man. And I talk about that just because I like to tell a story. It's not essential to this course at all. And then I'm going to talk about, in the extra material, these are the same knives, all right? This is how the knife looks basically when it's brand new. It's like I think you can get this knife for a little over $22. And I actually talk about where to get this really cheap but really awesome throwing knife for outdoors. But everything will break away on these type of knives. It will. There's a lot of force in throwing knives. So I talk about how to do what I like. I like to take parachute cord and I make a macrame handle here, which if you just do it on your own, it's very loose and flimsy, but I have a way to make it so it's really tight. And this one could have used an extra turn, but it's been on there for over a year of a lot of use. I don't just throw this knife. I mean, this, I do a lot of gardening and digging with this, you know, and it's a really great knife. And I talk about knife sizes and targets. I talk about targets, what makes a good target, and indoor targets. I talk about quite a bit. There's 27 different classes on here. And there might be more. There's a few things I didn't cover in this would be quick action drills, you know, which I just don't want to cover that. Quite frankly, I don't practice, you know, like wing like on Hollywood, you know, real fast, like quick draw. I mean, it's not safe. It's a kind of a dangerous thing to learn, but you know, I understand if you do. I've tried it a few times, and there's a way to throw the knives without the spin. And I'm teaching, you know, to throw Crocodile Dundee style, or whatever you want to call it. Bill the Butcher on Gangs of New York, but I'm teaching to spin, which really, it's all you need. The two basic throws I teach you and I talk about are all you need. But there are some people that throw a knife with no spin, and it takes a lot of force, and you know, all power to you. There are other courses out there, but these people don't cover it like I do, quite frankly. I want to say that I hope with this course to take knife throwing out of the shadows. You know, it's kind of a circus stunt, kind of a gypsy kind of thing. I don't know what you want to call it. It's not really mainstream, but I think knife throwing should be a mainstream sport. Call it a martial art, but you see in martial arts, they have UFC fighting and all kinds of tournaments in martial arts. There should be knife throwing. It should be come more into its self and out of the circus stuff, sideshow stuff, you know. So I'm approaching this whole course in a logical manner, like I would cover it to train new soldiers on a new weapon system in the Army, which I've done quite a bit of over the years, a long time ago. And that said, these videos aren't professional. They're as good as I can get them. It's just me out there with a camera and some editing software at home, you know. So, and I'm old. I'm getting old and dumpy. I've seen the videos. There's guys out there that are young and cut and lean, and they can really throw a knife, pretty impressive on their videos. But how many times did they throw that knife to make it stick? You see somebody on YouTube throwing a knife, and it's pretty impressive. How many times did he throw it before he made it stick? Maybe he can do that every time? Maybe not. You know, I'm going to wrap this up. My battery died on my camera. My oversight. As I was saying, the way you're going to become the best knife thrower you can ever become is through a lot of practice. And that's where this video course is actually ideally suited to help you out. Because I could be standing right next to you, right there with you every day, telling you this and that and demonstrating to you this and that. You're still the one that's going to be throwing the knife 100% of the time. So I'm doing that with these videos. I'm demonstrating and explaining things and giving you tips that I've learned through the decades. And what you do with it, how far you take it, is really going to rely on your skill. Everybody has different levels of skill, quite frankly. But a lack of skill can be overcome by more practice. But the amount of practice you do, you practice. The basics. You can get through all your knife throwing situations with the 2 throws I'm going to show you. There's no doubt in my mind about it. But if you're going to be practicing a lot, and I hope you are, you're going to have to do it safely and responsibly so that you can keep practicing through your life. And you don't injure yourself with a bad throw getting stuck or falling on it or injuring somebody else or worse, or you don't ruin your arm. Because you practice a lot, but you also got to be mindful of your shoulder and different things that you could throw your arm out, especially when you're older. So I forgot to mention, I wrote a book on this called Sgt Shank's Book on Knife Throwing that sells on Amazon, and you can buy a paper copy of it or a digital copy of it. And I wrote that book back in 2011 or 12. And it still sells, and it holds down 4 out of 5 stars. It's got about 150 reviews, so that's not too bad. I mean, I didn't think it was really that great. I'm surprised anybody bought it. But a lot of people seem to like it. But I'm going to tell you, you can get this video course is better than the book. A lot better. I cover a lot more material. And honestly, this kind of thing, I think, is covered better with a video than a book. What got me into it? Why did I even write the book? Because I bought a book on knife throwing years ago. And this guy, it was just pictures of this tall, lanky guy. Every page was full-length pictures of him throwing a knife. That's it. I'm like, this is BS, right? Yeah, he looks cool, like throwing a knife. But it's another thing. I was going to teach the proper form to throw. But, you learn to throw when you're a little kid. And so what works for me may not work for you. There are some things to avoid. Then I do go into that. There are some postures you want to avoid when you're throwing. It's going to affect your accuracy, and it could induce a shoulder injury. But I talk about that a little bit, but not a whole lot on throwing posture, because we're all put together different. But there are a few things to avoid, and a few things like following through that can help you with your game. Well, all right, let me see. Is there anything I left out? I'm going to wrap this up for the battery guys again. For my batteries down. I've worked my butt off today. I've talked about my book, Sgt Shank's Book on Knife Throwing. Here's a picture of that book. It's on Amazon. I talked about my experience as a training sergeant and my military approach towards training. In this case, knife throwing. With safety first, learn the knives, what makes a good knife, and what, things like that. And then we talk about basic skills at sticking the knife. Then we work on refining that and refining your accuracy and some other things. We've talked about safety enough. Why I cover safety quite a bit in this, because I want you to keep throwing knives for a long time. I don't want you to have an accident and it changes or ends your knife throwing game. So yeah, picture off. What this course can do for you and what it cannot. What this course cannot do for you is take away the need for you to be practicing a lot. Practice makes perfect. There's no way to circumnavigate that fact. What it can do for you is put you on the right path to being the best knife thrower you can ever become. I'm certain of that. I really go into depth on this. Knife throwing is a Zen thing. That's the whole thing about it. It's like throwing darts but a lot more, takes a lot more of things coming together. You've got to make an assessment of the blade, where the balance is on a given knife, the range, you know, you've got to put it all together and hit your target point first. Or if you throw darts, they always hit point first. Now knife throwing. So knife throwing, to me, the lure to it, it's a sport that takes a lot of mind, body, soul coming together, and training. Practice, practice, practice. If you practice enough throwing knives, honestly, and you do it safely, like I cover in this course, it will be like driving a car. It'll be awkward at first, and you know, but you'll get it to where you don't even have to think about it. It'll just be a reflex. Honestly, you'll make the assessments mentally with your mind and your arm and what you're throwing at, and it'll be instant, darn near instant, if not instant. But to get to that level is going to take a lot of practice on your part. And I could be standing there next to you like an instructor, and you're still going to be the one throwing the knife. So I think this video course is just as good, you know, as if I was standing there with you. Because I haven't left out anything. I put everything I could possibly think of into this. All right, that said, I'll talk about the Patreon. Unfortunately, yes, I'm trying to make a little money off this. I like free things. I have free material on YouTube, quite a lot of it. It has nothing to do with knife throwing. It's quite the opposite in a way. I'll talk about that on my Patreon channel. But the Patreon channel, you're going to get the rest of this course that I'm not offering for free. I let you sample the way I teach things, and you decide if it's worth, you know, whatever I'm charging for it. I haven't decided, but I'm not going to charge a whole lot. I'm not a greedy person. But yeah, my working days are coming to a close. I should be retired now, fully retired, but I'm still working. So I'm trying to think of, I enjoy this, really. This is something I enjoy. It's really a passion. So yeah, I'm trying to make a buck off Patreon. I'm only asking that you do this once. You know, you watch the free stuff, pay the nominal fee to get all the other stuff, and there's quite a bit more. And then unsubscribe. I don't expect you to hang in there, you know. So Patreon, yeah, you're going to get all the rest of the knife throwing classes. There's going to be quite a few more. And you decide whether you think it's worth it. And then if I put others, I might get into tomahawk, hatchet throwing. I don't know. And I might just start posting things that have nothing to do with knife throwing. I've got a lot of stories. You know, there's another side to me than knife throwing, and I've got a spiritual side where I talk about paranormal encounters I've had and my journey with God throughout my life, and things I've witnessed, like seeing the angels and things like that. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. And maybe I'll throw those into but I don't expect anybody to, you know, if you decide to do the Patreon thing, I don't expect anybody to hang in there more time than they need just to watch the remaining like 17 videos, something like that. That's a lot of videos still. I don't feel like I'm really being unreasonable here. I mean, if you bought my book, you'd be paying just about the same, and you'd be getting a lot less. So you decide. All right, with that said, I'm going to roll the end screen here on this introduction, and to show you what the course outline looks like on this. And yes, on all my classes, I say class dismissed. So there you go. And I know it's kind of corny. I've been out of the military for quite a few years. Well, class dismissed.